The county fairground buzzed with the usual chaos. Tractors parked crookedly in rows, barbecue smoke curling into the blue sky, and the sharp rhythm of Hank Duggan's voice slicing through it all like a knife. Hank was a legend in these parts. Worn boots, a battered cowboy hat, and a voice like gravel wrapped in honey. He could auction off a rusted wheelbarrow and make it sound like treasure. But today, Hank wasn't selling just tools, goats, or rusty antiques. Today, something different sat beside his auction stand, caged, tense, staring out with amber eyes that dared anyone to come closer. Brutus, a monster of a dog, part Rottweiler, part who knows what. Broad shoulders, ragged scars across his snout, and a snarl that had made more than a few grown men step back. He paced inside the heavy-duty kennel like a storm waiting to explode. Hank cleared his throat and grabbed the mic. "All right, folks. Before we start auctioning off your grandma's butter churns and Cousin Eddie's rusty lawnmower, I got a special offer. One-time deal." People chuckled and shuffled forward. Some already had their phones out. Hank had a way of turning everything into a performance. He gestured toward the cage. "This here's Brutus. Don't let the name fool you. He ain't no cuddly cartoon character. This dog's meaner than a bobcat in a burlap sack." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "But here's the kicker," Hank said, eyes twinkling. "You tame him. You take him. No charge. No auction. Just walk up, calm him down, leash him, and he's yours." A beat of silence. Then someone in the back muttered, "Is he serious?" Hank nodded. "Dead serious. You want him? Prove you can handle him." Brutus growled deep in his throat, the sound vibrating the metal bars. A few teenagers stepped forward playfully, but the dog lunged, crashing into the side of the cage with a thud that silenced the jokes. The teens backed off fast. Hank shrugged. "Told ya." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some folks were amused, others uneasy. Everyone kept their distance. It was part spectacle, part warning. Hank had issued similar dares before. Drunken dares to lift a hay bale with your teeth or ride an angry goat. But this one felt different, more serious, more dangerous. And still, no one moved. Brutus snarled again, lips pulled back. Even the bravest hands stayed at their sides. That's when, from somewhere in the crowd, a small voice piped up. "I want to try." And everything went silent. Heads turned in unison. The crowd parted like the sea, revealing a small figure standing near the front. A girl no older than 8, wearing a bright pink hoodie and mismatched sneakers. Her hands were clasped in front of her. Her voice had been soft, but confident. Hank blinked. "What did you just say?" "I want to try," she repeated, a little louder this time. Whispers surged instantly. Someone laughed nervously. A woman gasped. Her parents, clearly nearby, rushed forward. "Lily, no," her mother said, grabbing her arm. "That's not safe." But Lily's eyes were fixed on the cage. Brutus stood still now, silent, staring straight back at her. His hackles were still raised, but he wasn't snarling. Not yet. Hank stepped forward. "Look, sweetheart, this ain't a puppy. He's not nice. He's not even trained. You need to step away, all right?" "I won't touch him," she replied, voice even. "I just want to sit." More murmurs spread. Someone said, "Is she crazy?" Another added, "That dog almost ripped Polly's glove clean off last month." Hank knew what they were talking about. Polly, the shelter volunteer, had ended up with 10 stitches and a fear of big dogs after trying to walk Brutus. Since then, Brutus had been kept in reinforced cages and was handled only with thick gloves and poles. No one got near him anymore, not even Hank without full protection. "You're not seriously thinking of letting her, are you?" a man asked. But something had changed. Brutus hadn't moved. He wasn't barking, wasn't throwing himself at the cage. His eyes followed Lily, alert but curious. "Let her stand by the fence," said a woman quietly. "She said she won't touch him." The tension was a live wire running through the crowd. Hank looked back at the girl, small, calm, her hand still in her mother's, but her eyes steady. He sighed. All right. 5 minutes. By the cage. Nobody openin' nothin'. You just sit and talk. You get nervous, you come right back. Understand? Lily nodded. Yes, sir. Her parents looked uneasy, but Lily gently slipped from her mother's grip and stepped closer to the cage. Brutus's gaze tracked every movement. The crowd leaned forward. Phones were raised again, but no one was laughing now. She stopped a few feet from the bars, crouched slowly, and sat cross-legged in the grass. And then, in a voice barely louder than a breeze, she said, Hi, I'm Lily. Brutus didn't growl. He didn't bark. He blinked. For a long moment, nothing happened. Not a bark, not a growl, just the heavy sound of Brutus breathing and the faint rustle of wind through the fairground tents. Lily sat still, legs folded beneath her, pink hoodie bright against the sun-dried grass. Her hands were in her lap. Her face was calm. Everyone watched, holding their breath. Brutus didn't lunge. He didn't snarl or bare his teeth. He just stared at her, tail still, ears twitching ever so slightly. Hank, still gripping the microphone, had forgotten to speak. For a man known to rattle off 100 words a minute without blinking, his sudden silence was deafening. Lily leaned a little closer, just a few inches, still outside the cage's reach. You're not mean, she said softly. You're just scared. Brutus's ear flicked again. The crowd murmured. A woman near the front whispered, Is she? Talking to it. Lily continued, her voice almost musical in its rhythm. I get scared too. Sometimes at night, or when I don't know people, but it's okay to be scared. A man near Hank chuckled under his breath. She's treating that dog like a scared toddler. But Hank didn't laugh. His eyes stayed locked on Brutus. He'd seen that dog throw himself at grown men, chew through steel food bowls, and crush a metal water bucket with his jaws. But now, he was still, watching, listening. She's different, Hank muttered. Lily reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a crust of bread, probably from lunch. She didn't toss it. She just set it on the grass, slowly, right in front of her. Then she scooted back a few inches. Brutus didn't move, but his nose twitched. That's the first time I've seen him notice food and not bark, one of the auction hands whispered. Usually he thinks it's a trick. Hank nodded absently. Maybe it is, but not hers. 5 full minutes passed. Lily never tried to touch the cage. She just sat there, humming a tune that only she seemed to know, pausing every now and then to talk. Not loud, not demanding, just steady. Then, slowly, Brutus lowered himself to the ground. He lay down, head resting between his paws, eyes still fixed on her. A collective breath escaped the crowd like someone had released a valve. Hank dropped his gavel to the ground without noticing. Something had just changed, and no one could quite explain how. It wasn't just quiet. It was unnatural. The kind of silence that made even the wind seem hesitant. The auction, once buzzing with chatter, had come to a standstill. Nobody was looking at the livestock pens or the antique tractor lineup anymore. Every single eye was locked on the girl in the pink hoodie and the beast lying in front of her. Brutus wasn't asleep. He wasn't relaxed exactly, but he was no longer dangerous either. He was listening. Lily, still cross-legged, resumed her soft humming. The same tune she'd started before. It wasn't a real song, just something that danced in the air, almost like a lullaby without words. And Brutus, he didn't move, didn't growl. His eyes blinked slowly, like he was trying to remember something long forgotten. Something warm. Something before the cages, the beatings, and the shouting voices. A boy near the back whispered, He looks peaceful. His mother hushed him, but her eyes never left the dog. Hank finally took a few steps forward. Slowly, carefully. He didn't dare make a sound with his boots. His heart thudded in his chest, louder than any of the auctioneer calls he'd made in 30 years. "Never seen him like that," he mumbled. One of his assistants, an older man with a leather vest and hands like sandpaper, shook his head in disbelief. "He ain't just calmed down. He's locked in on her. Like he trusts her." Lily reached into her hoodie again, and this time pulled out a small stuffed animal, a gray plush elephant with one ear barely hanging on. She held it in her lap and began speaking softly. "This is Ellie. She helps me when I feel scared." Brutus didn't react for a moment. Then his nose twitched again. She scooted just slightly forward, still careful to stay a safe distance, and placed the toy on the grass. Brutus raised his head. The crowd collectively tensed. His massive paw moved forward once, then again, slowly, gently. His nose touched the elephant, and he sniffed it. Gasps echoed from all directions. Then, with the gentleness no one imagined he had, Brutus nudged the toy back toward her with his snout. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't an accident. It was a gesture, a moment, a connection. And in that moment, every adult who had ever called him a lost cause suddenly didn't know what to believe anymore. Hank took off his hat and rubbed the back of his neck. "Well, I'll be damned," he whispered. "She's doing it." The fairgrounds had returned to normal by the next day, mostly. Auctions resumed, kids chased each other with cotton candy, and old farmers haggled over rusted tools like their lives depended on it. But behind the main barn, a small crowd had started to gather again. Not for the pigs, not for the tractors, for her. Lily had come back. No announcement, no fanfare, just the same pink hoodie, a folded napkin in one hand, and a hardcover book with a dog on the front in the other. Brutus was still in his cage, but now he wasn't pacing. When he saw her approach, his ears perked up, and he let out a low whine, more longing than threat. "He remembers her," someone whispered. Hank was already there, leaning against the post with a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. "You really come back just for him?" he asked, curious but cautious. Lily nodded. "I brought him meatloaf. From last night. And a book." Hank squinted at her. "You planning to read to a dog?" She looked up at him, completely serious. "They like voices. It makes them feel safe." That answer caught Hank off guard. He tipped his hat back and stepped aside. "Well, carry on then." She knelt outside the cage and unwrapped the napkin slowly. Brutus wagged his tail once. Just once. It was enough to cause a collective gasp from the small group watching. She slid the meatloaf gently beneath the cage bars. Brutus sniffed it, then looked at her. She didn't reach in, didn't push. She just waited. After a moment, he ate. No growling, no hesitation. Then she opened her book and started reading. A chapter about a dog who had run away and found a family. Her voice rose and fell in soft waves, and even the adults who had come out of pure curiosity found themselves lingering. Brutus didn't lie down this time. He sat upright, ears alert, eyes on her. He listened. By the end of the second chapter, Lily closed the book. "I'll come again tomorrow," she promised, patting the grass. Brutus gave a small whine again when she stood. Hank watched all of this in silence. He looked at the beast he had once dared the world to tame, and the tiny girl who had done it with no more than kindness and patience. "Dan dog's got a soul after all," he muttered. Then, under his breath, "And so does she." By the third day, Lily wasn't just a curious sight. She was a story. A small-town legend in the making. The local diner had already coined her the Dog Whisperer, scribbled in chalk on the specials board beneath the meatloaf. Kids at the fair ran up to her like she was famous. Even the grizzled auction-goers who'd once dismissed Brutus as beyond hope now stood silently nearby, arms crossed, pretending they weren't watching her every move. Hank noticed it all. He watched from the auction booth, sipping his coffee and shaking his head with a smirk. "Brutus is more popular than the prize hog," he muttered. Brutus, for his part, had changed too. He didn't growl at strangers anymore. He didn't lunge at the cage bars. When Lily showed up, he paced in circles, not with aggression, but with anxious energy, like a kid waiting for recess. And when she sat, he did too, right across from her. That day, she read from a book about animals finding homes. Brutus tilted his head at certain words, nudged the grass with his snout when she laughed, and even rested his paw near the edge of the cage, close to her hand. Still, she never touched him. Not once. That unspoken boundary, that quiet understanding between them, had become its own kind of trust. Then came the question, spoken first in whispers, then louder. Why isn't anyone trying to adopt him now? Hank was asked that a dozen times before lunch. Because he's still dangerous, he answered each time. You saw what he was like before. One good moment doesn't erase a history of bites. But even as he said it, Hank wasn't sure he believed it anymore. That evening, after the fair quieted and the last of the visitors filtered out, Lily stayed behind. Her mom, waiting patiently by the fence, watched her daughter kneel in the grass beside Brutus's cage. You ever wonder what made him so angry? Lily asked softly. Hank was walking by, and he stopped. Dogs like him don't get mean on their own, he said. Somebody taught him to be scared. Real scared. And scared dogs bite. Lily nodded slowly. That's what I thought. She pulled out a crayon drawing from her backpack. Herself and Brutus, sitting together under a tree. She held it up. Brutus didn't just look. He stepped forward, slowly, pressed his nose gently against the paper, and for the first time since the dare, Lily reached through the bars. Her fingers brushed his fur. Brutus didn't move. He didn't flinch. He closed his eyes. By the next morning, the cage was different. The heavy-duty padlock was still in place, but someone had draped a colorful blanket over the top. Lily's blanket, folded neatly. A quiet sign that things had shifted. The kind of detail people noticed without speaking. Hank stood near the gate, arms crossed, chewing a toothpick. He watched Brutus sit patiently behind the bars, tail swishing like he was waiting for an old friend. She's late, Hank said out loud, mostly to himself. The crowd today was the biggest yet. Reporters from the local paper, folks from 3 towns over, and even a woman with a clipboard who whispered words like therapy certification and animal behavioral study. But Brutus didn't care. He only watched the horizon. And then she came. Pink hoodie. Ponytail bouncing. Same confident stride. Brutus perked up instantly, tail wagging faster now. He gave a short bark, not angry, but eager. Hey boy, Lily said, walking right up to the gate. This time, she didn't sit. She crouched, unlocked her small backpack, and pulled out a leash. The crowd inhaled sharply. No way, someone murmured. She's not. She can't be serious. Even Hank moved forward. Now hold on, Lily. That's still a wild dog in there. Lily turned and looked up at him. Not to me. Her mother stood nearby, tense but silent. Her eyes locked with Hank's, and in that glance was something deeper than permission. Faith. With slow, practiced movements, Lily knelt and slid the leash halfway under the bars. Only if you want to, she whispered. Brutus looked at it, then at her. Then, carefully, very carefully, he stepped forward, lowered his head, and slid his neck into the loop. Gasps. Someone dropped their phone. Lily didn't yank it. She didn't cheer. She just smiled and whispered, "Good boy." Hank took one step forward. "Lily, what are you doing?" She stood now, heart pounding, but voice steady. "I'm going to walk him out of the cage." She nodded. Every eye was on her. Someone started filming. A news van rolled up with its satellite raised. Hank opened his mouth to object, but then closed it. He looked at Brutus, calm, sitting, eyes on Lily like a compass locked on north. He stepped forward, and with one last look at the crowd, unlatched the cage. It creaked open. The world seemed to freeze. Lily held the leash, gave a small tug, and Brutus, fierce, broken, impossible Brutus, stepped out into the sunlight. It was only 20 steps from the cage to the gravel path that wound around the fairgrounds, but each one felt like a mile. Brutus's paws crunched softly against the dirt. He didn't pull. He didn't panic. He walked beside her, his massive frame calm and measured, like he'd done it 100 times before. Lily held the leash with both hands, not tightly, but firmly, as if she knew they were carrying something bigger than a dog walk. Around them, people didn't speak. They barely breathed. The kind of reverent silence usually reserved for churches and miracles. Cameras clicked. Phones filmed. Even Hank stood stunned, hat off, one hand on his heart like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He was unadoptable. One woman whispered. He was dangerous, said another. But neither could finish their thought, not while watching Brutus walk quietly at Lily's side, his tongue out, tail wagging slow and steady. No aggression, no fear, just trust. As they made their way around the barn, Brutus paused only once, at the shaded patch of grass where they'd first met. He sniffed the spot, then looked up at her, eyes soft and thoughtful. She knelt down beside him, rubbing behind his ears gently, then hugged his thick neck. "You're not a bad dog," she whispered. "You were just waiting for someone to believe in you." Brutus leaned into her hug. That was the moment the local news would later freeze for their headline photo. The girl in pink, arms around the monster no one could tame, the beast who only needed kindness. Later that day, the shelter staff met behind the barns. "I can't believe I'm saying this," said Hank, "but I think he's ready." "For adoption?" asked one of the handlers. Hank shook his head. "For her." The paperwork was rushed, donations poured in, and the next morning, Brutus officially left the shelter for the last time. Head held high, leash in Lily's hand, tail swishing like a banner in the wind. People clapped. Some cried. And Hank, watching from the edge of the crowd, wiped his eyes and muttered, "Took a kid to do what grown men couldn't." A week later, a new sign appeared outside the shelter. "Every dog deserves a second chance, even Brutus." And beneath it, in a smaller frame, was a photo of Lily and Brutus, sitting in the grass, side by side. The fierce dog, the brave girl, and a story no one would ever forget.